Welcome to Culture Before Content. Culture Before Content, from Music for All and presented by Yamaha. And now, here's your host, David Duarte.
Hey, welcome to the show and a happy Sunday to everyone. Unless you're listening on happy whatever day of the week you happen to be on right now. I'm David Duarte, your host for today's episode of Culture Before Content, and we are so glad you could join us here on the Music for All podcast network. And thank you to Yamaha, our national presenting sponsor, for their incredible support for bringing this to you. At Music for All and for all of us here, and I'm sure everybody around, our mission is to create, provide, and expand positively life-changing experiences through music. That's what we do. It's great. So if you're joining us live, you're here on YouTube, you're here on Facebook, feel free to throw a comment into the chat. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe, share it with your friends. Maybe just tell us what's going on. Like, for example, my favorite topic of the week was a week ago. It was like 90 something degrees here in Washington. And today it is 67 degrees. You got to love the changes. Get all 4 seasons in like 2 weeks. But if you're joining us on audio, the audios come out on the Music for All podcast network, which you can find at musicforall.org/podcasts, which is both on Apple Podcasts as well as why am I blanking? As you'll find us, just go to the website. Anyway, those come out on Mondays. But I hope to hear from all of you, and I hope you'll enjoy the show. So last week, we had Dr. John J. Gallagher. He was the arts administrator from Longwood School District in central Brookhaven Town, Suffolk County, New York. He shared his insights on elevating your music program by promoting yourself through strategic public relations, fostering community collaboration, and engaging students. It was fabulous. He spoke about how important it was to be your self-promoter and bring your program to your community, to your school, and to everywhere. Because if we don't do it, who is going to do it? Because we are the key decision makers on making our amazing culture in our schools. And it was great. Anyway, check that out. And going on, let's get to this week's guest. This is always my favorite part, introducing somebody new to the culture. Joining us this week, we welcome Scott Casagrande, a visionary educator and from retired John Hersey High School, director of bands, to discuss his journey in building successful band programs and whatever we decide to talk about. From Arlington Heights, Illinois, please welcome to the show, Scott Casagrande.
Hi, David. Glad to be here today.
Welcome to the show. Now, see, in my brain, it's funny because Casagrande is a city where I grew up, and so, very amazing last name. I love it. So, why don't we start the show today with tell us who you are? Give us a little bit about who you are, and maybe what are we talking about today?
Well, I taught in Illinois for 33 years. I started in an urban school district and then moved to a rural school district and then finished up my career in a suburban school district here in Arlington Heights. I'm still here. I retired in 2021 and I'm failing at retirement miserably. I'm as busy as I ever was. So that's and I'm also, I think, on year 11 as one of the coordinators of the National Festival for Music for All. And I also coordinate the affiliate regional music festivals. And you have one very close to you there in Portland. And I also coordinate the affiliate marching band events. So
that's amazing. So to my listeners and to my watchers, check out some of his past performances. I got a chance to listen to your band today, and it's neat because when I'm doing work, I like to listen to my bands in the background. And holy cow, you just had some amazing. So we're taking a look to our listeners at his website, which is Scott Casagrande, which I will music.com, which is SCOTTCASA. GRANDEMUSIC.com. Just all one word, Scott Casagrande music.com. But you should check it out. There's a lot more on there besides it. You can see pictures of them. You can listen to some of the recordings that you have on the website, and also talk about some of the amazing things that you do on there as well. So let's start off the show by saying, welcome to Culture Before Content. What type of culture do you want to talk about today? What does Scott Casagrande have to offer to the world today?
Well, I think there's so many aspects to culture. When I saw the title of your podcast, I had to think about it, to be honest, because it says culture before content. And I like that because in order to have, you can't get to content unless the culture is what it needs to be. And so establishing that, maintaining it, is something that happens every single day and in little small increments over a long period of time. But the content of what we teach, I think in many instances is not a priority like it needs to be. Um, and so, I like the fact that we're focusing on culture and I have a strong belief in the content that music educators should be focusing on as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
just on that comment alone, I think the reason the show kind of got its title is because that's what I believe. I believe the content is the most important part, and that's how you get it to your students is like kind of like the impetus to where this was all began. Because without having your content in place, you can have all the culture you want. It doesn't mean you're going to have a great band program. And the neat thing that you said to me right now, which speaks to my heart, is you said you've taught in rural areas and you've taught in suburban areas, so you can really speak to like some of those differences, because for those rural communities out there, it's a lot different than teaching in inner city or suburban. I've taught inner
mhm,
city, I've taught suburban. It's pretty much, and like right now I'm kind of teaching in right kind of rural inner cities, not rural inner city, rural suburban. It's just
mm.
a suburb, but it really does function more like a rural community. But let's go on to that content. What beliefs do you have on this content subject?
Well, okay, so I mean, I could start with this. There's back in 2014, the College Band Directors National Association held a conference, and they're focused on what are the challenges of higher education and teacher training. And they had a panel of 6 people. Frank Battisti was on there, Larry Livingston was on there, Scott Schuler was on there, and Craig Kirchhoff was on there, the director of bands from University of Minnesota. And he's been a long-standing clinician at the National Concert Band Festival, an icon of our profession, and one of my heroes. And the everybody on the panel was asked one major question that they dug into deeply, and then they were asked to answer the other 5 questions. There were 6 panelists in a more superficial way. And Craig's question is, I got it right here. I pulled it up. In your view, what is the role of college ensemble director in the preparation of the future public school instrumental music teacher? And he went on to talk about this, but this really struck me when I read this for the first time, and it's been a few years now. It was an epiphany for me because I've been in a lot of band rooms over my life. My father was a band director. I've been watching music education from the sideline and in the middle of it for my whole life. So Craig said these things. He said, I believe that students of all ages can be deeply moved by the power of music. I believe that students need us as educators to move them from a love of the activity of participating in band, orchestra, or choir to a love of music. I believe that the only way to move students from a love of the activity to the love of music is to enable them to experience the best possible music that is available to us as educators. And so I don't agree with all of that, meaning, he's talking specifically about moving them from a love of the activity to a love of music. I think they can love both, and they need to love both. I think as public school teachers, we need to focus on life skills and, preparing kids to be better members of our society and our culture. And the culture that we set up in our band room is a training ground for what it takes for our kids to be successful in life. Um, but we are also the only people in the building that are teaching our kids about artistic music, or should be teaching them. And we have 4 years to get as much good, if we're in high school, 4 years to get as much good music in their head as possible. And so that they continue to be um, lovers of music and continue to support the arts. Why is it that we have more people involved in music education today than ever before in the history of our country, yet professional institutions, artistic institutions, orchestras, community bands are closing their doors? And I believe it's because music education has dropped the ball in many instances in promoting the importance of artistic music and what it can bring to someone's soul. And so, I think Music for All is doing a really good job with that. Obviously, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. It's something I believe in. And, and with the National Festival, that is a very important aspect to all the groups that are accepted and participate. We talk a lot about depth of music, depth of artistry, depth of experience from a music standpoint. So, when I read that from Craig, it really hit me big because I see a lot of my colleagues focused on the life skills part of it, setting up the right culture. But what is the content? What are we focused on getting kids the best music that we can get them? 4 years for high school kids of the best music, jam it in as much as we can so that when they graduate and they move on to the next part of their life, they never forget how that music touched their soul, right? They're going to remember the friends that they made in the band program. They're going to remember great experiences that they shared with their friends in the band program. Are they going to remember the music that they made with their friends in the band program? Or the music program in general. So, I share that whenever I have an opportunity. I did a bunch of clinics over the last 3 years in different state conferences. And that was one of the big messages that I shared with other people, and it seems to be resonating. So, if I can get somebody to think about the quality of the music that they're putting in front of their kids at all opportunities, then I think I'm successful. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think about that because I mean that does make you think, because it's funny because I think about all the different types of programs we have all around the country, from large to small, from big, it doesn't matter, and access to resources. And so and I think what's hitting home with me with what you have to say is quality music that looks different depending on who you are. And I think maybe that's something for you to help expand upon it, you as the guru of like what a good band sounds like. You know, you don't lie to me. I know who you are, but I'm just saying. But what I'm saying is, I think of myself like I'm in a program. Let's play all. Speaking of which, I've had Craig Kiercroft as a band director. I got his Minnesota audition. I was there when he auditioned for the pro. I got Hindemith. I got Symphony in B flat. Just throwing that out.
That's awesome.
I know, and then it was the year I left, so he got hired like right. I mean, I literally got when he got hired, and it is very prolific to have access to these amazing people. Like here it is. But you say quality music, and then that makes me think about the content. And so how do we connect those two? How do we instigate quality in our programs through our music choices and through what we teach? And then just on my last little tidbit here is I believe we are lifelong promoters of music. Like you can't take music away from me. It's just who I am. You can't take band from me. It's who I am. And I don't know when that switch flipped or when I became that person. And that's what we're trying to instill in our kids. You don't have to be a music teacher, but I mean, I guess it's twofold. Let's talk about the quality of music in our programs and what that looks like in different scenarios.
Sure. And it does look different in different places. For me, and this is my definition of art, does it stand the test of time? Meaning, like, David, you and I are about the same age. And when we were in high school a long time ago, there were the hot, composers that came out. And everybody, when this composer put a new piece out, everybody had to play it. And that hasn't changed. There's a lot of that right now. And but how many of those composers that were hot back then are still around? a small percentage of them. And that said, what's quality music? And to me, it's like an onion. The more time you spend with it, the more it gives back to you, right? And so, if you keep coming back to that piece, or you keep coming back to that artwork, does it give something back to you? And if it does, you're going to continue to revisit it. Great music does that. Great art does that. And so, but in the moment, in the here and now, is it standing the test of time? Well, I mean, and we're in a place right now where underrepresented populations are writing a lot of music. I feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose, trying to keep up with all of the new music that's coming out from young composers, new women composers, new people of color. And there's so much out there. And really digging into that score. And in the past, well, it's on somebody's list, or I've seen this performed 100 times, so it's withstood the test of time. Well, now we've got Omar Thomas, a new piece that came out from him, or Kalijah Dunton, or all Kataj Copley, all these new composers, and really spend it. We have to, as educators, we have to actually spend a little bit more time than we would have otherwise, which is a lot of time before. Now it's even more to dig into those scores and look, are there hidden things in there? Are there things in there that engage our kids beyond the first, once they learn the notes and rhythms, are they going to love that piece of music? Once they solve what I call a math problem,
Yeah, and I think that's part of it too. I think the word that's popping in my head right now is connection. Like, you have to connect what you play, because you just said it. Once you get past the notes and rhythms, I know so many. I'm a former administrator. I've gone through the classroom. There's so many band directors that at times they're teaching the notes and rhythms. They go do the concert, but they've done zero connection of the piece to their students, to their audience. As I've gotten older, that's one of my champions, even with my students, is trying, like, we're playing this piece of music and there is a reason it's been selected, and how can we connect? And so, what do you think about the connection piece of the music?
Well, I think, there's many points of connection on a piece of music, right? From an artistry, that's what I've been, talking about, previous here. How much depth is there? Does it keep giving back? But what I love about the time that we're living in right now is the points of connection are expanding exponentially. So does that composer look like me? As a kid in an ensemble, does the subject matter of that piece connect with me? Is there something about this beyond the actual depth of the music that connects? And then connecting more than one of those dots. Just because that person looks like me, or looks like the majority of the people in my ensemble, does that mean I should program it? Maybe not. And being selective of finding the really good writers right now that maybe identify with our kids in different ways, and still giving them the best music that we can. So,
And do you
there's
have
a
any
balance? There's a balance there too. We need to be encouraging these. How do we encourage these new young composers? We play their music. So there's a balance there of how to program all this new literature that's out there. I mean, you could go a lot of different ways with it. I'm sorry, I interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, please. Like I said, it's to me, like, do you have any suggestions for people to go out there and find some of this? Because that's the thing for me is, you can only go to so many conferences. And the neat thing that I've come up across the last few years is the honor bands have been they have been very purposeful in the honor bands. My students have been participating about this up here in Washington. They are very purposeful in exactly what you're trying to say. And what's neat is the kids are connecting to the music and they're bringing it home to the band room. They're talking about it. They're actually wanting to do works of the composer now, because and sometimes my students will surprise me. You speak of Omar Thomas, my kids are hitting me with music that it's like, oh my, when did you hear this? And it's because they're actually listening, they're connecting with the music they're finding. But the honor bands in this area of this country is doing just a fantastic job of exactly what you are saying, and that's actually helped me as a teacher. I hate to say this, but those of us at our age, we had our repertoire that we learned coming out of college.
That's right.
And it's quite a different repertoire now than it is. And just and I think for me, it's just connecting to other band directors, asking pieces that they've played, watching other bands on. I mean, you can watch bands online like crazy now. It is just absolutely fantastic. But like I said, where you've heard a lot of pieces lately. Do you have any advice for people to seek out some of this stuff, or do you have any magic tricks in your pocket?
Well, it's just taking the time. I mean, we have this great resource, the internet. There's websites everywhere on, I've got them listed in my computer somewhere, but there's probably 4 or 5 different websites that you can go to, and they have, composers and pieces that are written by marginalized composers. And, everything's on the website. You just have to look for it. And then, not because, 3 other people programmed it, should you program it, really do the homework and dig into those scores and make sure that it's worthy of your students' time.
What it really has done for me, though, is exactly what you said. It's connected to me to a composer at the time I had not heard about or I'm unfamiliar with. And it's starting to bring, and again, this is just like what we're doing. It brings conversation, and that conversation brings awareness. And now, like for me right now with my freshman bands, I'm craving to give them that same type of representation in our programming. And then you're thinking, what are some, a lot of times, grade 4, 5, 6 is a lot easier than to program 1, 2, 3. And so trying to find those pieces, I try to keep my concerts in both so that the top groups and the younger groups are doing the same programming, just at their different levels of music. But as you've retired, what have you noticed? I mean, in your own program, what did you notice in your last few years before you retired?
Well, I mean, getting into culture, I was at Hersey for 23 years, and I had 3 different jobs during those 23 years. And I kind of look at it like they were marked by a new principal. Somebody would retire or leave, and the next person would come in and the game would change. And that oftentimes meant that the culture would change. And that, coupled with the change in our community, when I started at Hersey, we were probably on the conservative side, very white. But as I was there longer, we had more of an infusion of different cultures that came into the building. A lot of Latino, a lot of Black people, a lot of Eastern European people. And Chicago has a very large Polish population. I've heard many times since I moved here from Virginia that the only city in the United States that has more Polish people or only city in the world that has more Polish people is Warsaw. So yeah. So, I mean, there's a huge Eastern European population, a lot of kids that speak Polish in my class, that were speaking Polish in my classroom. So, just a lot of different cultures. So that's how my job changed and the culture changed. And I had to adapt to that. How many times over the course of my career did I see somebody's culture change within their building and they didn't adapt to it? And then the program suffered, the kids suffered, the quality of the education suffered because the directors didn't make the adaptation that they needed to make in order for the program to be successful. And that's a tough pill to swallow. It is. I mean, there are major changes that many teachers have to make in the middle of their career that it's not easy. You have to do things differently than you've always done them.
Yeah, you've got me thinking about a good example. And in my own experience, I taught at a high school where, like, the higher socioeconomic of the high school, because the growth that happens, the school splits into two high schools, and then the next thing you know, you went from 2,500 kids at the school down to, like, 1,500 kids in the school, and at that point, you're realizing that there's a different, like, I've lived it a couple times where your whole band program, the whole culture changed, and you have to adapt, and you can't do things the way that you used to do, but you can still, again, I think this goes back to the word quality. You can still do a quality performance. It doesn't matter. And that's, I always think to myself, like, in the situation that I'm in now, I'm at a much smaller school than I've ever been. There's like 950 kids in my school, and I can't program the same way I did when I had a school of 3,000. Like, at all.
Yeah,
It's,
that's
and
right.
matter of fact, I think my whole school would be like my last school's freshman class. But it doesn't mean we don't work as hard or put the quality out. And so, you know, now that you're retired, what are some of your thoughts? If you had to go back, or you said you've been doing something different since you retired. You haven't told me this yet, but, like, say if you had to go back and teach, what would your mindset say to you now the day you would walk into a new program?
Well, I just walked into a new program on Saturday.
I
So
guessed good.
yeah. So there is a conservatory in Chicago. I'm about 45 minutes from the Loop in Chicago on a good day, 2 hours on a bad day. And in the Loop, there's a conservatory called the Merit School of Music. And the previous conductor retired from the position at the end of the school year, and they gave me the position. So I'm excited about this school because it's probably 75% of the band are going to be majoring in music or minoring in music.
Wow.
Almost all of the students that are in the band are definitely going to be playing when they go to college, and they are there because they want to be there. So it's a different culture than, teaching public school like I did for so long. But we had our first rehearsal on Saturday, and I immediately talked about what I want, my vision for what I want that group to be and what I want that experience to be and what they want that experience to be. We had that discussion, and I believe that is the successful culture enables the students to be part of the decision making, and a successful culture really leans on the students to drive that culture. I always felt like every year I had a new band because seniors left, and then all of a sudden there's a different feel in the room, and that's generated by the different personalities that are there in front of you. And so, I mentioned adapting over the course of my career, but the good teachers are also going to adapt every year. I mean, you're teaching and you're enabling kids to have that say. What's this year going to be look like? How are we going to get from point A to point B? Like we always have, but it's a different path. So what's the path? How do we do that? And that communication that's constant is the key to that happening. And it's not just the kids too, it's the adults. You have different group of adults that you're dealing with. The booster group changes, your administrators, maybe your colleagues in the department change, and you got to make that adaptation as well. And it all starts with communication.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah.
So
And,
what,
and
so what about
empowering other people to have a voice. Yeah. Go ahead.
I think that is hugely important. I mean, I spent last week, we talked to, Dr. Gallagher spent, the time on, self-promotion, all things, but it comes down to communication is a huge part of it. And it's also a responsibility. So it goes back to, like, I was thinking about, so we've talked about quality music. We've talked about, just the things that it takes to be successful. And I think that's what this driver is, finding someone like you. Now that you're in this situation, I'd be more curious to see, like, what are some things that you don't have to do? I don't want to talk about this, but what are the things that you don't have to do? And now what are your things that you now have to keep up with now that you've got kids in a different, you have them at a different point? It's kind of shocking, like, each school that I've taught at had a very different personality. And, so, it depends on, one school I had I had 0% middle school feeder program. And another one I had, 50 kids that could play all 12 scales. Yeah, it's different, but I'm still the same teacher, regardless whether I'm working in front of kids that are going to be music majors or kids that just started their instrument on last Thursday.
Absolutely.
And they bought the pink instrument that doesn't really play. But we will
T-bone.
Oh.
the P-bone, right? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So so let's talk more on this content. So like we've talked about some physical. Is there any musical content that drives your belief system?
Boy. I mean, if you're talking about, I mean, I think this is what you're asking. I've always believed in lists.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for many years, National Band Association had a list that was kind of like the Bible for band directors. You're always going in there, and it was before the internet, and yeah, that tells you how old it is. But we would always go to this book, and look at what the top pieces are that great musicians and educators believe, and that's kind of like filling in the holes of your education. As we go through college, there's no way we're going to know everything we need to know once we walk across that stage with our music ed degree. That's only the beginning of our education. And one of the things that we need to focus on as educators is constantly looking for new literature. And we were talking about that before. We have this onslaught of new composers, and looking at the lists that are not there. Although I know the National Band Association is working on a new list of marginalized composers and trying to list the better pieces that are available. But looking at lists for me that are created by people that I respect, and if I don't know a piece of music on that list, I better know it. And so especially in today's age, going on Spotify or YouTube and finding the piece, and even you can now find the scores if you go to the composer's websites, and just looking at the music that way, and just giving a listen to it. And going back to the National Concert Band Festival, it was so formative for me as a young teacher. The National Concert Band Festival, Music for All, started in 1992. And I was there in that year, and I've been at every one of them since 1992, even before I was involved in some of the coordination of it. And we'd go there and listen. There's no restrictions on literature, so I would
Right.
sit for 3 or 4 days and listen to these great bands play the best literature that's available. And that's how I learned the literature, just sitting in that audience. And then the people that are there, the icons of our profession, they're just sitting around. It's not like when you go to the Midwest clinic, if you see them in the hall, it's a big moment. But here they're just sitting in the seat, between bands that they're either clinicking or evaluating, and you sit next to them and say, hey, what do you think about that last piece of music? What's hard about it? Is it worth time? And just picking their brain. I mean, that's one of the wonderful aspects of the National Concert Band Festival. And now you don't have to go to Indianapolis as an educator. They're live streaming it. So,
I was working a festival, and I snuck my AirPods in so I could listen to bands all day long. It was, it was absolutely fantastic. But I was thinking about the National Concert Band Festival and just getting that evaluative feedback, because I know that National Concert Band. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, because again, I'm not the expert on National Concert Band Festival. I'm just a believer in it. But it's not a competition. It's not like your average festival, but it's built on feedback, a connection to composer, connection to, maybe you could speak on some of the things that it does, because that's what I am looking for. You spoke about that festival. My plan is to take my band to the festival that's right down the street from me. Because I do have the satellite. I actually live in the attendance zone, by the way, of the festival. Yeah. And so Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of like your what you believe in. It's kind of what this festival does. And when you say, yeah, here I'm talking to this composer, as a young teacher, I may would never have approached anybody because I wouldn't have known that. But then,
Mhm.
that's that connection to the people. Like, if somebody meets you in the audience, connection to you. Because I think that's what has happened in my lifetime. I has met so many people and I connected them, and then I learn from them, just like I'm learning from you today. Again, this is my personal private PD that I get to share with the world. Um,
Yep.
and but speak about what that, and I guess we got to a little early here on my talking about the festival. I'm really not interested
Yeah.
in necessarily in what the festival, so to speak. I'm interested in what the festival does, because that's what I'm craving now, as in my late 50s, is I want to know how to get my band to sound better and people to give me the advice to do it, so that I believe in.
Well, okay, so the National Festival started in 1992, and Scott McCormick was the CEO at the time, and it was part of the transition from Marching Bands of America to Bands of America. That the beginning of that event, and Scott brought in the icons to help him form that new culture, right? And so William Ravelli was involved, and Frederick Fennell was involved, and John Painter was involved, and the list goes on and on and on. And those people are still involved. The new John Painter, the new William Ravelli, the new Frederick Fennell, they're with us. And they set this format up as non-competitive to perform. When you're there, you've won. It's competitive, very competitive to get in. This year, for instance, we listened to 3 days nonstop, 12-hour days of listening of all the bands that applied to get in. So it's competitive to get in. I mean, you got to make sure that you're sending the best possible uh, audition recording that you can send, unedited, of course. And yeah, and so once you're there, um, there is no competition, and it's all about playing the best music that fits your band, and not over programming and not under programming, right? And like our group played at the Midwest Clinic with our concert band and our jazz band, and the impact that playing at the National Concert Band Festival 4 times, twice at Plainfield and twice at Hersey, that impact was exponentially more than the 2 performances at the Midwest Clinic. There's no restrictions on music. You play at the Midwest Clinic, the music is picking the music is just, oh my God, I have PTSD thinking about it.
Is this the
All
right
the
piece?
all the rules that you have to follow. And then the lack of restrictions just enables artistry. Plus, we have these icons that are interacting with you. And at the pandemic, we rebooted the National Festival. So what used to happen was the bands would come, they perform on the stage. The panel of people is listening, they're making comments, and then you go to another room and you get an extended clinic with one of those people, which is awesome. The new changes are that we're pairing each one of the performing bands and band directors with a clinician for 2 1-hour sessions before they perform in Indianapolis. So now those icons are having an impact on the process and the journey of getting to Indianapolis for the National Festival. And then in addition to that, we're also pairing a composer of one of the pieces they'll play in Indianapolis with them for 1 hour before they get to Indianapolis. So that window is opening now. And because of the pandemic, here we are on online doing this, and there's no reason that we can't do clinics and interactions online with the best in the business. So the next step for the National Festival is being more engaged in the process, in the journey.
Well, speaking of the process, I actually have a question for you now, because I think you say the bands are competitive. If anybody's listened to the bands that play, it's like it to me, every band sounds like a college band for the most part, and just some of the incredible musicianship that comes from these young people, phenomenal. But I'm thinking about the right now. What's in my head is the audition process, or even just submitting a tape. Can you talk about maybe submitting a tape or like some recommendations? Because I know you say you have the best, but I think there's a process here where you should submit. If you think you're ready, or you're wanting to, or maybe it's 2 years away, maybe thinking about submitting anyway, because I do believe you get some feedback. Can you talk about that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So everybody that sends an audition tape, we have three of these, great educators / musicians sitting in a room. We're pumping everybody's audition recordings through a big speaker, and everybody's commenting as if we were sitting in an auditorium listening to a live performance. So you're going to get feedback from three phenomenal musicians, educators, as part of that audition process. So even if, and this is particularly helpful, I think, for uh, people that feel like they're in areas where they can't bring in really good people to give them feedback, you can send a recording and get this feedback, on a national level. Where's our band at? You can find out.
And that's what I wanted to reemphasize, because you get feedback from the audition, you don't have to make the festival to wait to get feedback. Everybody gets feedback. Is that correct?
That's right. Yep. Yeah. It's part of the process. Absolutely.
Which
yeah.
is
That's
why
a really important part of the process.
Yeah. I mean, I said, like, we have competitive festivals, we have non-competitive festivals, and they both serve their purpose. Don't get me wrong. I just think feedback from the masters is incredible. When somebody says something, and again, you may have heard it 100 times, but when one person says it differently, magic can happen. And even, just connecting your students to these people. I love to give the students a chance to do research on the people that are evaluating you. There's a reason these people are gurus. So I did want to emphasize that, submitting gets you feedback, and don't just not submit because, you might be a year away. You might be 2 years away. You might be ready and not know it. There have been surprises in people's lives. Like, I want to encourage anyone, at times you think.
And David, you mentioned the Affiliate Regional Festival that's in your area, the one at Mountain View with Sam Ormson. And there's 32 of those, 30 around the United States. And so, we started this. That was kind of what brought me into the Music for All team, was 12 years ago. We started building these events. So at the school that I just retired from, Hersey, we started a festival with the national festival in mind as our model. And we set it up the same way, and it grew. When I left, we had 45 bands performing in one day on 3 stages. Wow. And bringing in great people, non-competitive, bringing great people to give feedback, extended clinics, et cetera, et cetera. And then we started growing those events across the US. And so, you're in an area that you can go get a mini national festival in your area and get some good feedback. And I think one of the reasons that those are so successful is that those events are bringing people from other areas of the country. And one of the problems that we see with music education is that there's a lot of inbreeding, meaning like, okay, I'm in Illinois, and I'm only going to bring the people that are close to me here. And so they may be my college professor who's going to say the same thing, or maybe it's a guy or a lady who is very active in this, and I've already heard them before, but I have a comfort level there, and so I'm going to bring them in because I know what I'm going to get, and I know what my students are going to get. So these affiliate regional festivals have grown because we're bringing a voice from outside that area into this new, and we're infusing new ideas and changing the culture of how artistic music is taught in those areas. So
yeah, I could kick myself for last year. I ran into a financial issue with, again, my school district kind of, like you get those surprises, like one day, like, hey, you owe this money and now you have zero. And so, Carol Britton Chambers was coming, and that was somebody who I wanted my band to play. I love playing her. Matter of fact, that's my first piece of the year, is Carol Britton Chambers. But does every regional site post who their clinicians are ahead of time? Because I want to encourage people to go check these things out. Like,
Absolutely.
Look in your area, because you will get a chance to realize who you are playing for, and a chance. And again, it is not competitive. It is such an enriching experience. I crave these type of festivals, especially if you're in a new program and you're wanting to learn. It's go.
Well, the festivals have also been successful because we're not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, meaning the culture that is in those areas dictates how that event is set up. So, for instance, some of the affiliate regional festivals are set up as a warm-up to go to the state assessment, right? So those are probably happening in late February, early March. And, most of the assessments we see are happening in March, maybe in early April. In Illinois, we're actually in the first week of May. For that statewide assessment. And so maybe the affiliate festivals are set up to help bands get ready for that next thing that's happening. And some of the festivals are the culminating event, right? And some of the festivals are a blend of the two. Like the festival here in Arlington Heights, if bands are going on to the state event, they may go there to get feedback before they go to the state event. If they're not going to the state event, they may go there as, okay, this is the end of our year with this music. Other events, like, they're in Washington, that event there started at Mountain View because they wanted to bring some of the best schools all together in one place, so that they could play for one another. And it grew from that. So, there's no one size fits all. It's what does that area need? And then what are we doing to support it? So, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, like, my interest in the National Concert Band Festival, because it's, again, I accidentally took a gap 11 years by becoming an administrator. Speaking about having to learn literature, like, after you get away from it and coming back to it, it's like I'm starting over again. And that's the same. And that's where National Concert Festival came, because all of a sudden my sister schools were going to it. I went to it. I took the school I had in Tennessee, had just been to it the year before I had got there. And so, like, that interest started going, like, tell me more about this. Tell me more about this. And so, like, I'm trying to, say, if it's different in every area, just do some research on where those festivals are and what they have to offer. And I say, try, look, do.
I like that. Try, look, do.
Try, look, do. It's I will say, like, you retired probably right in the middle of COVID. You graduated
21.
You retired 21, right? So that was like the year. I started this job in 21. I learned, like, what being a new teacher was like. Because it was different. But now, as here is 4 years later, it's normal. It feels normal again. It's finally starting to feel normal. And
amen.
And so, do you have any advice for band directors to encourage them to put themselves in this? Go out there, do this. Anything
I
to
just
encourage.
think, anybody that, this sounds bad, but I'll say it. I mean, if there's an integrity to your process of teaching kids and elevating them to the next level, these events are going to shorten that path and get you from point A to point B a lot faster than if you did not participate. And so, there are bands that, play at a super high level and keep coming back because they want their kids to have that experience. So a lot of repeat people. But I can also tell you that there are groups that will make it 1 year and then maybe their recording isn't quite as good the second time, or the other recordings are better than when they applied the first time, and they don't come back because they just don't make the cut. So,
Right.
It happens every year. So, yeah, I mean, obviously I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, so I believe in it. But I think there's such an integrity to the educational process in both the national festival and the affiliate regional festivals. getting kids to play at a high level, understanding, getting feedback, growing, not only your kids growing, but you're growing as a director. Because, we all know when we have a clinician, and the real person that's learning is the director, not necessarily the kids, right? So,
Absolutely.
yep. So anyway, yeah, I'm proud of that program, and I think it's a game changer. It's a difference maker.
See, I hate to point this out, but I really believe that that's the culture. Your culture is what leads you to your content. And that culture of the National Festival is not necessarily what makes you who you are, but it definitely shapes who you are. And it makes me think
if you let it.
Yeah, and it makes me think about, we talked about high school earlier. What are you? Thinking about high school, I have my thoughts. What shaped you in high school to become a band director? What were some of the thoughts that made you become a band director? Because we don't just take this thought lightly. No one said, I'm 12 years old. I think I'm going to be a band director when I grow up. I'm not sure anyone says that. Any memories?
I grew up as a band director's kid.
Oh yeah, you didn't have the choice.
No, I definitely had the choice. I mean,
oh no, you couldn't pretend you did.
Well, no. My dad taught me to love music, so there was. I had a lot of other people that helped along the way with that as well. I was lucky to be in an area in DC where there was great music everywhere. The military bands were there, and I had great trombone teachers and other conductors that were in the area. My high school director was really solid. We had a great band. I went to Lake Braddock in Fairfax, and Carl Bly was my director, and we had a great marching band. We had a great concert band. We had a great jazz band. A bunch of students that were there went to North Texas, played in the 1 o'clock at North Texas. We had it all. It was, I didn't realize it until I graduated, but I was super lucky to be there when I was there. So, it was just like, and I played in all these ancillary groups. There was a brass honor group that we played in, and I played in this group with future conductor of the Army band, and a couple of the other people that were in this group are playing in professional orchestras, and I was in the Norwegian Youth Symphony. It has a different name now, but like the principal cellist was Zool Bailey, who has this incredible career as a cello soloist, and I was around all these people all the time. So that's where I really think of myself as an orchestra person that does band, because the great literature is really more in the especially when I was a kid. It's a lot different now, but yeah, so that's where I really fell in love with artistic music, because it was everywhere.
Okay, last question, because see, just as I get to the conversation part of it, this darn show has to end, and it gets me mad. So hopefully we could get maybe down the road, get somebody like you back again, because I just loved hearing. All right, give me one thing, just thinking about your entire career before retirement, not last week, not when you restarted again. Think of one thing that was a memorable moment culturally that has shaped you to who you are today. Something in culture. I really believe, because you look how passionate you are about the high school group and the groups you played and the people that you connected. And I think maybe some of that might be on my question, is that, you probably provided that to your students on a regular basis, or,
Well, I got it. And this is a really good response, because I remember in my first job, I grew up in a program that had a lot of success, and the culture there was, this is what you do. You practice your parts, you learn your parts, you come to rehearsal prepared. And when you have free time, you're playing. And so I got my first job, and that wasn't the case. And I'm like, what is wrong? Why aren't you practicing? Why don't you have private lessons? Why aren't you doing these things? And then it hit me like a brick. That's my job, to teach them to do that. Right. And so I already had a pretty strong vision for what I wanted my culture to look like, because I grew up with it. And that vision was shaped not only with my high school experience, but my college experience, that big part of it. And then as I got older, that vision changed as I realized what kids could do and what they couldn't do, and how do I get them from point A to point B. That was my job, to teach them to love music and to love the band program. There you go.
See, it's all good. All right. So sadly, any
How about
parting
that for a
words?
closing
That was
statement?
a great statement.
There you go.
How about a parting word for our audience? It could be on any topic, it could be anything. What's your final thought for the day? Oh, yeah, I should probably introduce your email because, like, I always forget we have listeners. They can't see what we're doing. Maybe if they just try harder, you never know. It's Scott.Casagrande without an E, by the way. So it's
That's right.
Casagrande. I have to say it
Yep.
Casagrande, SCOTT.CASAGRAND at gmail.com. And like I say every week, email these people. They'll do something weird. They'll email you back and you can make a connection and maybe a new friend. You never know. All right. Final word.
Never stop growing. You and I, David, we were talking about this before we went on air, but like the experiences that we continue to have. And, when you stop growing as an educator, it's how do you model that with your kids? We want our kids to be open-minded and keep growing. And if we can't model that ourselves, how can we expect our kids to do that, our students? So, always looking for the next best thing, staying current with literature, right? And technology and teaching methods, and always growing. There you go.
That is some seriously great. Well, thank you so much for being there. This has been a pure treat. I have enjoyed every minute of this.
Yeah, I have
Thank you
too.
so much for coming.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
All righty, kids. I like calling you kids because then it's just like teaching in the classroom. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode on Culture Before Content here on the Music for All podcast network. We again thank Yamaha for their continued support as our national sponsor. Remember to share these on your socials if you find them. And by the way, it was Spotify. I don't know why I blanked on Spotify. That's what happens when you start getting engaged. And don't forget Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. But my name is David Duarte. I'm your host. Hope to see you next week. And we'll see you here again on Culture Before Content. Have a great weekend.